that was part A. B is knead and wedge a ball of clay. You guys have done that before. Kneading and wedging is really important for this project because you need your clay to be well connected, so to say. That way it doesn't crack when you later wrap this into a cylinder. Part C, let's see. Roll a slab of clay and smooth the surface. So you guys know how to roll out a slab of clay on the slab roller. Roll it out, make sure that it fits your paper, and smooth both sides of the surfaces, both sides. Let's see. I recommend using metal rib tool to smooth that, part C here. Okay, D, lightly mark the perimeter of your paper on your clay. So you're gonna take your paper and you're gonna lay it on your big slab of clay. And you're just gonna very lightly, with whatever tool you want, it could even be a pencil, very lightly trace the outline. The reason you're not cutting out your wall just yet is you're gonna mess with your wall design. While you're messing with your wall design in the clay, it might smush the clay out in certain areas and it might make your wall taller and shorter in some areas. That's why you only lightly trace your paper onto your clay. That way you can just see a temporary area of basically where your design should go. And then later, after you make your design and it all gets weird proportions, then you can recheck your proportions and actually cut it out correctly. Part E. Where's the camera? There we go. Pick a texture and press it into your clay. Do not apply the texture to at least the top ½ inch of your clay's lip. Make sure to avoid deep textures. They tend to thin and weaken your clay. So this is where it actually starts getting kind of fun. This is when you get to design your wall. So for this project, you will not be allowed to use the texture mats. I know you're bummed because a lot of you guys love them, but I want to push you outside of your comfort zone and get you to mess around with other types of textures and pressing around other things into your clay. So what I did is I brought a couple things that I thought I'd show you guys as examples on how to press in stuff into your clay to get designs. Plants make a really cool texture. They're fun to press in and you get a really neat impression from them. So before I press these in, you'll notice there's some tiny little brownish dots going all throughout my gray clay. The classroom is covered with red clay right now. It's just kind of how it is. So if you want to keep your gray clay super clean and pure, then just be aware that pretty much any tool you're about to use has red clay on it, so clean it first. Additionally, the slab roller has a lot of red clay on it. I recommend, if you want to keep your gray clay as clean as possible, before you roll it out on the slab roller, put a paper towel below it and a paper towel above it. That way the clay doesn't come into contact with the dirty canvas. Anyhow, back to textures. So rolling in this. You just lay it on. I'm going to lay it actually upside down. Actually, let's see, which side has more texture? You know, I think I will lay it this way. And when you roll stuff in, you generally want to keep rolling it in until it's completely flat. You want to be sure you're not applying too much pressure. If you apply too much pressure, then it is going to thin out your clay, and you really don't want that. So just light pressure over and over again until the object looks flush with the clay itself. And then you can simply peel it up. Pretty cool. Let me try to get a better view for you guys. So there's a tiny little leaf in there. I'm not worried about that. That'll burn out in the kiln just fine. Another piece that I have, just from a plant that I found at home, that would probably make a cool texture. Okay, it all looks level with the surface, and I'm carefully going to pull it out. Oh, I love that one. That's really neat. It has a very cool kind of pine mountain-y look, which actually would go really good with this work in progress I'm about to show you guys soon. Really neat. And then there's like other objects you can use. Here's a screw. So let's see what happens when I roll the screw into, this one's kind of tricky. into the clay. Okay, so here is a great example of a object I do not recommend you guys using to push into the clay. So we push the screw into the clay, right? It looks kind of cool. You can see all the design inside of it. However, this top part, as you can see right here, this top part's kind of thicker. So the problem is when you take any object and you press it into your clay, if the object at any point in it is as thick as the clay, it's going to go all the way through it, or so far through it that it causes the clay to be really, really weak. So I would not recommend using something like a screw, especially because of this top part of it. Stick to stuff that can be very, very thin to press into your clay. Okay. And then here's just the tool that we have in the classroom that you could use. There's a million tools you can use. This is just an example. You can take things and press them in a lot to create a cool like pattern type texture. So for example, I'm just going to kind of mock this one up really quick. I'm just pressing this in kind of at an angle, and anywhere where two of the dots line up is where my next row is going to have the next ones there. I don't think that makes any sense, but hopefully it does when you see it. So visually, I was kind of thinking this would end up look kind of like scales, but it almost looks more like beehive-esque. So, you know, you could play around with stuff like this and kind of get a design that you like. Okay, so after you have pressed in your designs into your cup, again, remember to keep the top ½ inch or more smooth, because that's where your lip is going to go, and you don't want to have a textured area where your lip goes. So after you've designed the wall for your cup, you are then going to recheck your measurements, make sure that it still lines up perfectly with your paper, and then slice it out of your slab of clay. And that's where my project is at this step. I've designed my wall, I've cut it out from the slab, and this is what I've got. What did I use to make this? What I chose to do is I took a, let's see. There they are. I took the backside of paintbrushes actually to make these dots that go along the edge. I wanted to make sure that they end up being perfectly straight because it is going to be a three-dimensional cup and I want them to all be level. So I actually took the straight edge of this and I lightly marked a straight line onto my clay. That way, when I started pressing in the back sides of the paintbrushes, it's at least a relatively straight line going through. So after I did that, I then took a toothbrush. I took the brushy part of it and I just stamped all in here. I think it's somewhat hard to see on the screen, but it kind of is meant to have like a stone-like look for the background. I plan to use a matte glaze in those areas to really emphasize it. And then you can also kind of see there's trees going along the bottom side of it, perhaps. To do that, I actually had a stamp that I picked up in Cambria over winter break, and I pressed that 2 times into the wall. Yeah. You guys are totally welcome to use stamps as well if you have any from home. You don't have to just use the stuff in our classroom. You can totally find things from home to use and bring those in. Just keep in mind they're going to get covered in clay. So if it's your parents' things, make sure that they're okay with it getting covered in clay. Some things can wash out with the clay, others not as well. So just something to be aware of.